Hey, welcome to another episode of the Fit Growth Machine podcast. I'm Brian Roisentul, your host, and today we are going to discuss about a really hot topic because the holiday season is almost here, and if you don't have any content strategy in place or you are looking to have one for next year, then this episode is for you. As Ruthie Sterrett here with me, uh, we'll discuss how to do exactly that as she helps women create values-based brands and consistent marketing and content strategies with the Consistency Corner marketing method. Before talking to her, let me tell you that this episode is brought to you by BSR Digital. At BSR Digital, we help e-commerce brands that want to scale their business to the next level through Facebook, Instagram, and Google Ads. Yes, even after the iOS 14 update, now more than ever, we understand that it's really important to level up the marketing and design a solid strategy as what used to work doesn't anymore. So if your e-commerce brand lacks a solid plan and professional team to increase sales, we can help the same way we have helped more than 1,000 brands like yours for over a decade. To learn more, you can visit us at bsrdigital.com, or you can also email us at hello@bsrdigital.com. Now, as promised, I have Ruthie here with me. Hey, thanks for being on the show.
Yes, Brian, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So why don't you start by telling the audience more about you and your story?
Yeah, so I am currently an agency owner of the Consistency Corner, which is a marketing and content strategy firm that we help businesses of all sizes with a marketing strategy and content plan that they can scale no matter what your budget or bandwidth. I've seen really small businesses trying to work on big business budgets and it doesn't work. And then I've also seen small businesses say like, oh, well, I don't have a budget or I don't have the bandwidth, so I just do nothing. And that also doesn't work. So we've created containers and options to support you no matter where you are in getting a consistent content and marketing strategy. And how I landed where I am today, I am a retail veteran. So I worked in store management, merchandising for over 15 years in the retail space, and then did 5 years in retail marketing and taught myself how to do marketing. And I've always had a passion around storytelling and branding, and was able to step into a growing company and support them with their marketing strategy and scale their e-commerce brand over 900% over 2 years. And a lot of that came from getting the focus away from the product and onto the brand, and really clearly defining the values of the brand, the ideal client, and all the really important brand details so that we could be consistent and grow, the business without focusing just on product, because people can buy product anywhere. And so if we don't have a strong brand foundation, that growth is going to be really challenging. So now I teach business owners in all different verticals and niches how to do the same thing.
That's really interesting because it's actually something we have been discussing a lot in the podcast, that people don't buy products anymore. They buy experiences, they buy from brands that stand for something. And I think that by doing things like the ones you do for your clients is really important nowadays because, things have changed. And before people, got away with selling products, and then COVID hit, and it was like an accelerator for many businesses because the online business is starting, growing really, really fast. But now things are different, not only because of technical things like, the Apple iOS 14 update, or, it's also about the context we are living in, the recession, costs going up and prices are not going up the same way, right? And probably costs for advertising, are growing. So what differentiates your brand from your competitors is what you do at the brand level, right? What you communicate, the story you have, the values you stand for. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And, not only has the environment changed from COVID and recession, but from a competitive space in terms of content. So we as consumers are now bombarded with so much content every day, so many social media platforms, so many media platforms, our phones, our computers, our TVs, the media that we read, that for brands, if we are creating content that is just like, hey, buy my thing, nobody's paying any attention, because that is content that is not creating relationships with people. And in order to cut through the noise of all that content and actually be memorable, we have to figure out how to build relationships with our content.
Exactly. So let's talk about, the holiday season pretty hot right now. So how can a brand go about it and say, hey, how can I don't know, plan ahead, my content strategy, let's say a quarter, a year, how can they get started with that?
Yeah. So as this podcast is airing, we're kind of in that Q4 space, and we definitely should be looking at next year. So if you have not started looking at 2023, number one, that's your first step. Get a 2023 calendar. Let's start looking at 2023 and build yourself a rough framework. And when I say rough framework, what I mean is you want to look at your calendar and you want to say, when do I have launches? Okay, what are my volume driving launches? Let's get those dates on the calendar. And then the next thing we want to do is look at promotional periods. So if there's times that you typically run promotions, Black Friday, Mother's Day, 4th of July, depending upon what you do in your business or what is kind of standard in your vertical or your industry, get those put onto the calendar. From there, what I really like to do is look at the entire year and kind of batch out campaign themes and looking at anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 weeks. What is my campaign theme going to be during that time? And the reason that I like to do this is this gives you an opportunity to create content that can be repurposed. It gives you an opportunity to create some authority. It gives you some opportunity to create content and put content out there that gives it enough time for you to actually figure out if it's working or not. So for example, if you are a company that sells products for women, around Mother's Day, you might have a campaign theme from like the beginning of March all the way to the beginning of May that's like top gifts for women or picks for mom or storytelling about women who are your customers, kind of depending upon what your brand can be. And then now we have this content framework that we can start putting things into the themes. And when I say things, like you're like, okay, well, Ruthie, what kind of things are you talking about? Well, what's the messaging on your homepage? What's the theme of your social media content during that time? What long form content are you creating in terms of maybe blog posts or podcasts or videos if you have a YouTube channel? And then from there, what social media content are you pulling from those longer pieces that reinforces that same messaging? And then like your email schedule, what's your weekly email or your blast emails that go out, or even automated nurture sequences that rely on this same theme. So you're creating consistency with your consumer so they're hearing it and seeing it enough times to actually get the message. Because like we talked about, there's so much messaging out there that if you think, well, I already posted about, this one launch. Okay, you posted one time. Like 2% of your audience saw it. We've got to be posting multiple times. We've got to be emailing. We've got to have it on our homepage. We've got to have long form content. And then the message in the campaign will actually be able to cut through. And then we'll have analytics to be able to go back and look at over that 2, 3, 4, even 8 week period for that campaign, what resonated, what worked, what was getting clicks, what was getting conversions, what was getting opens when it comes to email, what was getting engagement on social. And then you're able to learn to plan for your next campaign or future campaigns. And so as much as I love to have an annual plan, so you can map all of this out ahead of time, if you're like, okay, it's the end of 2022, I do not have an annual plan for 2022, what the heck do I do? And how do I think about Q4? I think Q4 is a really interesting time to start at least planning out a quarter at a time. And so you can look at those key dates around gifting and build out a content plan for both long form content, email, and social media based upon those holiday dates, and knowing that gifting and messaging around gifting is probably going to be your biggest theme during this time of year.
Okay. And what are some of the key elements that a campaign should include? For example, I don't know, a slogan, their own, I don't know, their own design name or talking points. I don't know what.
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that I teach brands in order to create authority with their content and with their brand messaging is to have 3 to 5 content pillars or content themes. And an example that I'll give you is if you're a fitness company and you sell fitness equipment. So one of your campaign themes might be fitness education and workouts. So that's a theme where we're going to talk about and we're going to create content that adds value to our customer that could include our products, but it also might not. You might talk about rest time, you might talk about sleep, you might talk about recovery, you might talk about, how to care for your equipment, things that have nothing to do with actually buying your products, but they're adding value to your consumer. You might also have, I'm thinking back into the fitness space, think about who your ideal customer is. So if you are a company that makes like leggings, okay, and you're competing with Lululemon and Fabletics and like these big companies, you're going to hone down into who is your ideal client and what is important to them. So maybe it's gym lifestyle, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's running. And then that might be one of your content pillars where we talk about those things and we resonate and we create relationships with the customers by creating content that speaks to their lifestyle. And then one of your content pillars might be your brand values. So I speak a lot and teach a lot to business owners to really identify and clarify their brand values, because as we've been talking about, people buy from businesses based upon their relationships. And if you haven't yet clarified your brand values, that's step number one. But if you have clarified your brand values, how can you create content to communicate those brand values to your audience? If you're a smaller local business and you are involved in community activities and you support maybe charities in your community, or you collaborate with other businesses in your area, that could be a content theme because you're part of the community, and highlighting and sharing the community, whether it's other businesses or even your customers, could be a content theme. So themes are like these big buckets, but then we can put different topics in those buckets. And so then when we think about mapping out a campaign is like I said, a 2 to maybe an 8-week time period where we're telling the story of that topic and that theme consistently throughout that same time period. And we're finding ways to weave in product into that storytelling. And from a creative perspective, and I will say I am certainly not a graphic designer by any means, but from a creative perspective, we want to create assets, whether it's social media pieces, homepage banners, web banners, blog banners, email headers, that are consistent across the entire campaign. So a tagline might make sense. It might not be a tagline. It might be a specific hero image that you use over and over again. It might be a couple of hero images that you intersperse with some sort of graphic element and treatment on it, so that the consumer is seeing, oh, this is part of that same campaign. I think back to Mother's Day and like having a pink bow overlaid on your images. I'm just like making stuff up off the top of my head. Or, holiday, it might be your theme is snowflakes. And so like you have little snowflakes that are interspersed into your creative assets so that the consumer can like signal and see, oh, this is part of that same campaign theme. And they're telling me information that's relevant to like that last piece of information that I saw.
Yeah, I think that it helps you create a world around your brand that wouldn't exist without it, right? Without that content. On one hand, in one case, you just sell products, and in the other one, you're an authority on something you decide based on your core values, as you said. And even more, I remember one of the interviews we did last year was with the founder of Echelon Fitness. They started as bike manufacturers. So, they manufacture bikes for, doing exercise at home. And then they created content around that so people are engaged. And they ended up being a content creation machine, and they create more content than Netflix. Now, they partner up with Pitbull, Disney, and many other artists to create content, and they even created a subscription. So they sell bikes, but instead of creating content around bikes, now they turn things around and they create content. They sell a subscription around it for exercise and all stuff. And then only if you want, as you say, as part of consuming that content, you buy those bikes. I mean, they're bikes or not, right? So it can even, unleash, business opportunities for you in an extreme, but it could happen as it happened for this company. So I think it's key for every brand to do that. And in a recent report that I don't remember the last name, but Andrew, the coach at eCommerce Fuel, one of the top communities of e-commerce in the US, they released a report recently, a few months ago, actually in July, that said that the the difference between the top performing brands in e-commerce versus the not performing ones, the not top performing ones, is the content creation and the branding that they have. So the difference lays there, not around how much they spend on ads or many other things. It's about the brand building around the company. So it's really important.
Yeah, I listened to an interview with Women in Retail Leadership last year from Kristen Patrick, who I think she either was at Claire's or she's at Claire's now. Claire's is in her history. I can't remember where else she worked, but she talked about how a product-based brand is really defined equally by the product, the content that you create, and then the consumer experience, because those are the three ways that a customer interacts with and experiences your brand. So product is only a third of that. So if we're not spending at least a third of our time and resources on the content that our consumer is consuming, we're probably missing out in building that relationship because the product can't do it on its own.
Yeah. This is really very interesting, and I have a few more questions for you around this topic because I know the audience will kill me if I don't ask you these questions. So, for example, I can imagine they are wondering like, okay, so I need to create content, I need to define my core values if I don't have that dialed in already. But then, how much content do I need to create to get started with this? How much is enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends upon starting where you are and doing what you can with what you have. So if you're currently creating zero long form content, let's start with one piece a month. It might be one blog post, it might be one video, it might be one podcast, it might be one meaty value packed email. Let's just start there with one a month. And from there, you can determine, well, how long does this actually take me and or my team? What is the ROI that we're getting? And I will caution you in saying that when you first start creating longer form content, you're like, there's no ROI. Nobody read the blog post. Nobody listened to the podcast. That was a waste of time. It didn't work. But the thing about long form content is long form content compounds over time, and long form content gives you a starting point to be able to repurpose for shorter form content. So I love teaching business owners to prioritize long form content in their planning first, because you can use that as a jumping off place for social media posts, for email posts, for even copy on product pages on your website. If you start with like a really good meaty piece of long form content. And so working with whether it's an SEO expert or if you have an SEO in-house team, doing keyword research around the keywords that people are searching so that you can create long form content that not only gives you a bank of pieces to pull for short form content, but it gives you what the consumers are actually searching for, so that over time you gain authority and you drive traffic to your site through that work that you did to create the long form content. So I would start with one long form piece a month and then work your way up to maybe one a week if you're able to get to that space. And then from a social media perspective and an email perspective, because everybody asks this, like, well, do I have to post every day? Should we be posting 3 times a week? And what about reels and TikToks and all of these things? That's where, again, you have to go back to what bandwidth does your team have? How can we push ourselves a little bit more to do a little bit more than we have been doing? I'm not saying go from 0 to 100 pieces of content a week, but if you've been doing 2 pieces of content a week, could you get to 3? And what would that look like? And how would it maybe drive your analytics and your metrics over time? And then whatever cadence you commit to. And I think Q4 is a great time to push yourself and increase and see if you can commit to being consistent with more content. After 90 days, reflect back and say, okay, did that work? Were we consistent with the strategy that we said that we were going to do? If yes, great. Can we keep doing that? If no, okay, well, what can we be consistent with? Because with a lot of these things, if we're like pumping out content, let's say we're pumping out social media posts and we're doing like the 30 reels for 30 days challenge, which, everybody says, oh, you're going to go viral. Well, no, you're not. If you can do that and you can keep doing it, great. But if you can't, pull back, and what can you do consistently? And that might be 2 reels a week. That might be 3 reels a week, whatever it looks like for your team. And that's going to depend upon the size of your team. It's going to depend upon the different hats that your team members are wearing. It looked very different for me when I was working for a retailer, when I was the marketing department, meaning it was just me, versus I became the marketing director. And I now had a team of 8 under me. We were able to produce more content, obviously, with a team of 8 than just me on my own.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the key here is to be consistent, right? Whether it's one piece a month or 8 a week or 1,000 a week, right? It's the key is to be consistent and not to do like, a huge effort to produce a one-time batch of creatives and then never again, right?
Right.
Yeah. And about the channels, I guess is the same concept, right? You need to choose as many as are fit for your business and the ones that you can sustain over time because they're really different. What are the key mistakes that you see when people try to post in many channels at the same time? Do you see that I don't know, they create a piece of content and they think it will work without any changes in every single social network?
I think when we start getting into multiple platforms, there's 2 mistakes that I see people make. One is not using Google Analytics and not even knowing where their traffic is coming from. And then 2, if they are using analytics, they're saying, oh, well, this got a lot of reach, or this got a lot of engagement, or this got a lot of likes. Okay, but did it drive traffic to your website? Because if at the end of the day, you pumped out all of this content and maybe you got more likes and you got more followers, but nobody was going to your website and your website traffic wasn't increasing, the content's not doing its job, because we have to have content that converts. If you are a product-based business, you're here to sell products, you got to get people over to your website. And the social media piece of it is just a part of that funnel. And so again, I say I like to give things a quarter, at least 90 days, so that you can have some analytics on what's working and what's not. And then when we decide that something is not working, it's not about like abandoning the strategy and being like, well, Pinterest didn't work for us, we're just not going to post on Pinterest anymore. But it's okay, what can I tweak? Do I need to do better keyword research? Do I need better graphics? Did I have any broken links? Was it, a matter of that I'm relying on only organic and maybe we need to work on a little bit of ad spend? And I'm a big proponent of testing organically before spending ad money. But it could just very much be after that initial 90 days of learning, we now need to make a tweak, and now we can learn some more, and then we can make a tweak and we can learn some more to get to a place where we're optimizing.
Yeah, one thing to add that we see not really often, but sometimes with our clients is that, especially those are new to, doing ads and all this stuff, they want to spend, I don't know, they need a video ad and they want to produce it, and they say, oh, I'm going to spend, this amount of time, I don't know, a month in creating this video. And then of course they expect it to do the world for them, to do everything in like a week. So I don't think that putting too much pressure to a specific piece of content or time to make it perfect. Of course, you want it to be, like, something decent, right? But not perfect, and then put all the pressure there and say, why didn't this piece of, I don't know, piece of creative or video didn't produce the results I expected. I spent like a month working on that, and now it's not working, right? We see that pretty often.
Yeah, I think a lot that marketing is very much like a recipe. And just like if you think about like a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, like, okay, you can't just put one chocolate chip in the cookie dough and then you have a bunch of really great chocolate chip cookies. Like you need a whole lot of chocolate chips. And so like your content piece is those chocolate chips. And if you can get like super high end, like Ghirardelli chocolate chips, like those are going to be better than the Costco chocolate chips, but they both work. So what is your budget? What can you afford? And just like if you're able to, you have to take one piece of the recipe out, it doesn't necessarily mean that the recipe is going to fail completely. But if you start to take a lot of pieces out, well, now it's going to fail completely. So like it's never just one ingredient, it's all the ingredients and how they work together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely, no doubt before and even more after this conversation, I think there's no doubt that we all need to do a level up in the, communication that we do, email marketing, social. But what about our website? What do you think about that? I mean, how often do people or companies update their website?
Yeah, so this is an interesting conversation, and I've worked in a business that was brick and mortar for a long time, and then transitioned into e-commerce. And from the perspective that I observed is that a business owner was willing to spend a lot of money on a lease for a prime location for a brick and mortar store. But then investing in a website felt like, oh, well, why would we spend money on that? Like, we'll just get the cheapest version of the website and we'll have the cheapest design. And we want it to do as much volume as our highest volume store with our most expensive lease. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. We have to invest in our websites just like we would invest in a physical location. And just like with physical merchandising, where we regularly have to re-merchandise and refresh our storefronts, websites are the same way. We have to refresh the content on our website. We have to consistently test, where are people interacting? What are they clicking on? Where are they falling off? And learn and continue to optimize our website, because not only is it going to get stale over time, but the market is evolving over time. So what our competitors are doing is changing. So I think with websites, when we're planning out, and I'm certainly not a CFO, so I'm not going to tell you how to manage your budget, but when you are planning your budget, if you're putting money into marketing and you're driving traffic to your site, you've got to make sure that you're also putting money into your site so that your site is optimized for conversion and your conversion rate stays on top of the trend. Because marketing's job is to drive traffic to you. Sales and merchandising is then converting the traffic that has come there. And they have to work together. I mean, marketing and sales absolutely have to work together. But yeah, I see people want to drive more traffic and invest sometimes in ad spend, but not invest in improving their site, which then makes the ad spend kind of a waste.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's something we cover a lot with our clients. Like if you have a leaky bucket, and we have even recorded an episode around that. Last year, we done our Larson at Bill Grow scale. It's like if you have, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people, or even thousands or hundreds of people going to your website only for them to leave after a few seconds, it's not exciting. And even more if you're doing everything that you were mentioning before, you're putting all this effort in creating this content, and then they go to your website to buy after they consumed all the content and to convert, and they see something that is not in line with that. Probably it's not going to cause a positive effect. So I'm with you 100%.
And one other thing that I want to call out really quick that also has to be in alignment is your assortment planning. And I see so many brands run ads for products. You click on the ad, you get to their website, and they don't have it anymore. Like, oh my God, you are throwing money in the garbage can because you were advertising for product that you haven't bought enough into. So your merchandising teams or your buying teams have to be in constant communication with the marketing teams and the e-commerce teams and make sure that everybody's on the same page, because you don't want to be having missed opportunities because your inventory wasn't in line.
Yeah. I can count a few times I've been in that spot as an agency working with e-commerce brands. They were great e-commerce brands, very successful. And I remember that they were out of stock of the best performing products, and they didn't tell us about that. And we were in a meeting saying, "Hey, we see a bottleneck here in add to carts. It decreased, the add to cart from visits, that ratio a lot, and why." And yeah, the other day we got out of stock and we didn't tell you guys. Sorry, it's like, okay, we're throwing a lot of money per, I don't know, thousands per day on those products, and then you don't have them anymore. We're the first that needs to know, and you need to stop all the communications talking about that. So yeah, it's something that it's really a challenge nowadays for many brands. The supply chain issues they are having. We have clients in many industries and they have a lot of issues, as many businesses right now. So I get that for e-commerce right now, you need to plan. This is really good advice, because you need to say, okay, I want to advertise, or I want to create content for this, but do I have inventory, to
Yeah, and from a marketing team perspective, having some backup evergreen content kind of ready to go, so that if launch date gets pushed out because of supply chain, deliveries don't arrive. Like, I've seen this. I have seen people flip their homepage, put banners up for products. You click on the banner, out of stock. And it's because it didn't arrive because of supply chain. But e-commerce team, marketing team never got that memo, went about their business and scheduled out their content. And likely it was because A, either they didn't know, but then B, they didn't have a backup plan. And so having, the world that we live in today with supply chain, having a backup plan of evergreen content, whether it's bestsellers or, some of that value-based content, educational type content, connecting with your clients on a values-based level that you can flip to if you need to, so that you can keep staying top of mind and keep communicating with your audience.
yeah. And what's like the minimum, like, let's say, like a small but decent team to create content? What does that look like? What roles are involved? How many people? Let's say, let's keep
Ooh,
it.
that is a great question. And I'd love to kind of just even get your insights on that. I mean, I can tell you the way I'd scaled a team was that it started out with just me, pulling graphics and images from vendors, being a third party product seller, using vendor supplied content. And then from there, adding to the team a photographer and a graphic designer, and somebody that we're able to take unique branded photos, create more unique graphics. And then from there, adding to the team like a digital marketing specialist, somebody that can really hone in and focus on email and social. And then, having support partners from an agency perspective, what you do around running ads is actually different than what I do. I focus specifically on organic content, and then I work with partners and ad agencies for paid content. So I think it really depends on where your business is in its life cycle, because a lot of times I see newer and smaller businesses trying to compare their chapter 3 to a competitor's chapter 17. And like, you can't do that. So we've got to focus on, where are you now? What are your goals for the next season, quarter, year, even 5 or 10 years? And then let's start reverse engineering and figure out what it's going to take to get there. If it's driving additional traffic to your website, yeah, it's probably going to take ad spend. It's going to take paid content. But then making sure that that ad spend is efficient, having the right agency partners and having the right in-house team who really understands the branding and the messaging, and then again is optimizing the site for the traffic that's actually getting there. So I know I didn't give you a straight answer on that, but
No, no,
it depends.
there's no single answer, so that's great. I know you can be, as you said, you can be on your own doing everything like, homemade or manually with your iPhone or phone, and then you can take it from there and say, oh, I have a few people in the agency mastermind I belong to that they record videos for YouTube all the time, and they rent a studio and they go there and go once a month and record, I don't know, 4 or 8 videos for the month, and they try to create the content in budgets like once a week or once a month, and they do it that way. So they spend, I don't know, 8 hours or 6 hours in the studio recording. They have everything predefined. So they have a team. They have the people filming the thing, defining the content for the videos. So in this case, I know this is way beyond the video, right? It's a whole campaign for your brand. So yeah, I was thinking, I don't know if brands would need a creative director, I don't know,
Well,
someone
yeah.
about concept and
Yes, I think as a team is scaling, I think when a business is growing, the CEO a lot of time is the visionary. The owner is the visionary, and they kind of have this, okay, this is where I want to go. This is the story I want to tell. This is the message that I want to have. But they get to a point, even within their growth, that they have to now start focusing on other things than just the messaging. And that's where a marketing team can come in and support. And whether that marketing team is in-house and you start out with, a generalized director of marketing, or you do even like a fractional director of marketing or CMO, somebody to come in and say, okay, business owner, I want to work with you. We're going to be partners. We're going to look at your goals. We're going to reverse engineer. We're going to figure out how to take your brand and your business goals and connect them through marketing, and then determine what is the budget that it's going to take to get there. And if you don't have that budget, what can we do with what we have? And so I think for a newer scaling business owner, that having a director of marketing or a marketing strategist or marketing manager, at least to kind of start out from there, is super important. And then adding specialties, I think from an agency makes a lot of sense. And then bringing them in-house once the work level makes sense. Because a lot of times you want the area of expertise, but you don't necessarily have the workload to, bring an in-house person.
awesome. I have one of the last questions for you. Thank you again for your time. Just wanted to know the following. We are approaching the holiday season, and you mentioned before that, for, I don't know, social blog posts, or I mean, social content blog posts, or any other form of content, typically you don't want to throw like, one campaign and see how it goes. You just want to, or not, sorry, one campaign, what piece of content you want the campaign to last, I don't know, to measure at least every 90 days how it goes, more or less, right? What happens with the holiday season? Some people say, oh, I want to start and do, a communication like a pre, having people lined up, before it starts, doing some pre-order stuff or whatever. And sometimes they say, oh, the pre-order will last 3 days, and they expect a lot from that effort. How could you, in a nutshell, redefine the strategy for the Q4 for a brand, for an e-commerce brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I just finished, we did an incubator called the Retailer Roundtable that myself and a couple of other retail veterans put on, where we talked about and we helped solopreneur retailers plan for holiday in July. I mean, we said, this is Christmas in July. We're going to start planning for this right now. And we really talked a lot about leveraging your gift guide, leveraging SEO from a visibility perspective, and then getting a content plan in place, because from a trend perspective, people are searching for gifting and gift ideas earlier than ever. I mean, we were seeing Halloween type content popping up at the end of June, like before 4th of July. So the market is starting earlier and earlier. But if you haven't started super early and you're like, okay, it's September, it's October, I have not put together an entire plan for Q4. I've barely thought about Black Friday. Number one, I have a resource for you. So I'm sure Brian will put this in the show notes, but if you go to theconsistencycorner.com/holiday content planner, there is a 6-week content plan for you for email and social media of ideas that you can use to at least get started. And then from there, I would say at least map out October, November, December, knowing that October is very much a brand building time. October is where you are connecting with your customers to say, I'm for you. We are for this type of person. So if you're building a gift list for this type of consumer, we are it. Or, hey, remember us when you make that wish list, we are it. Make sure that you're on our wish list. And if you can have a gift guide done October 1st, great. But if not, we got to get it out there by November 1st, because your gift guide is going to be your anchor for all of your content through Q4.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, as always, for everyone listening or watching this, everything will be in the show notes. So if you're watching this episode and you're not on the website, you can head on over to fitgrowthmachine.com, and you can see the show notes there once you look for this episode. Or if you are if you're listening to this, you are probably seeing the show notes as we speak, so you can find the resources mentioned here, there in the notes for sure. So I wanted to thank you because you've been great. You have, delivered great advice for the audience. And I know things are challenging and more than ever, as we discussed. And having these, dialed in is really important for every company. So I think that it's really valuable content that you provided for all of us today. That being said, I just wanted to make sure that I don't know if I didn't ask you about anything that you wanted to mention before we wrap up. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that I didn't ask you?
Yeah, I also host a podcast, The Consistency Corner. So if you guys are looking for additional marketing made simple strategies, understanding how to connect your brand to your business goals, and with a little side of mindset, because I'm a big fan of mindset work and mindset coaching, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Search The Consistency Corner, and definitely would love to have you in our community.
Yeah, that will be in the show notes as well. So feel free to go there to check it out. So where can people go to learn more about you and the company?
Yeah, so theconsistencycorner.com is our website. And then I'm hanging out most on Instagram. So you can find me at The Consistency Corner over there.
That's awesome. Hey, Ruthie, thanks for being on the show. You've been really great.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a fun conversation.